Hello, this is Sarah Kite with UT Extension here in McMinn County, and today we're going to have a party. It's the last day of our week-long courses on home food preservation. I hope you've enjoyed all the classes that we've had. If you've not caught them all, I posted all the videos on our YouTube page and our Facebook page. You can find it at UT Extension McMinn. Check it out. And today we're going to talk about what is the difference between a WaterBath canner and a pressure canner. So let's get started. A WaterBath canner looks like so. And we always want to know about the microorganisms that we don't want to grow in our home foods. We got yeast, molds, and bacteria. The most common sources of microorganisms are in soil and water. These can grow over a wide pH level. You'll see them growing in your food at room refrigeration temperatures, the slimy spoilage, the souring, the green. Molds, they like to have that fuzzy growth. And bacteria are microscopic organisms that cause spoilage that you definitely cannot see. So we use a WaterBath canner to destroy these microorganisms so the foods that we can don't cause us to get sick. So foods that we can use in a WaterBath canner would be your acidified foods, which would be your jams and jellies, your fruits, your pickles, and salsa. They all have acid in them. Meat and vegetables are low acid unless we can in a pressure canner. The canning temperature for a water bath would be 212 degrees. 212 is boiling, and that's enough heat to kill bacteria that would grow in acidic foods like your fruits, your jellies, your pickles, and your salsa. Make sure you know your altitude so you can adjust your recipes accordingly. Here in McMinn County, we're not above 1,000 feet above sea level, so there's no adjustment needed. Here's your WaterBath canner. It's a large cover cooking pot with a rack. You can use any large metal container as long as you have enough room to cover the jars with at least 1 to 2 inches of boiling water. The diameter of the bottom of the pan should be no more than 4 inches wider than the stove burner. Don't use a large kettle that fits over 2 burners. The jars in the middle may not get enough heat. The canner needs to have a flat bottom for your electric ranges. If it's a smooth top stove, it may not be designed for the weight of the canner with jars and water. So check with your manufacturer. The canner needs to have a lid and a rack inside. The rack keeps the jars from touching the bottom of the canner, which allows the water to circulate freely. It's a big canner, it's a lot of water, so start preheating that as you prepare the fill for your jars. You're making salsa or jams and jelly, whatever it might be. Load 1 jar at a time. Try not to tilt your product. You don't want the liquid inside to seep through that lid and be in between the lid and the jar, which will not give you a good seal. Add them as needed. Make sure you get a ruler out and measure 1 to 2 inches above the jar. Set your heat to the highest setting. Get a nice vigorous boil. At that point, you can start your timing. If the water stops boiling at any time, turn the heat to the highest setting, bring it back to boil, and begin your process time from the beginning. After they've processed, wait about 5 minutes before you remove the jars. Use a jar lifter, put them on a nice cooling rack. Let them sit undisturbed for about 24 hours. Don't cover them or wrap them with towels, just let them sit undisturbed. And then they'll be ready to go in a nice, cool, dark place for consume. So WaterBath, anything that's acidic, which would be your jams, your jellies, your pickles, and your salsas. So if you don't have any questions, if you do, please contact me anytime, and I'll be happy to help answer all of your questions. So WaterBath canning is very simple. It's a lot of fun. And make sure that you use it for all your acid foods, acidic foods. So now let's talk about pressure canning. Sometimes pressure canning could be a little bit scary for people if you're new to it, but don't worry. We're going to cover that today so that you don't have any questions. So pressure canning, here we go. Pressure canning 101. Very simple, very fun to do. Again, we're working on those microorganisms that we want to make sure that we kill. And as we go through today, you'll get to know more about what to look for. We don't have testers for the pH, so don't worry. Follow a good tested recipe, and you'll be just fine. So, I'll share my screen with you, and you can see that. We can proceed. So we'll talk today about how pressure canning prevents botulism, how to use your canner, how to pack your jars. Again, watch out, we don't want to grow any botulism. Anything that is low acidic, meats and vegetables, have to be in a pressure canner. And it's the high heat to kill the spores. The spore-forming bacteria botulism, they like to be in low acidic foods. That's how they pressure canner. Again, water boiling in a water bath only reaches 212 degrees. In order to destroy the spores of botulism, the temperature needs to be between 240 and 250, and it's only done in a pressure canner. The pressure of the steam and the pressure of the canner increase the temperature above the 240, which will kill the botulism. So even though you like to do green beans, it's important to know that green beans are low acid and they need high temperature of 240 to kill the botulism. So please don't put your green beans in the water bath. If you don't have enough time for pressure canner, or you're just not interested in hauling that thing out and heating up your house, another way to preserve your green beans would be freeze them. Water blanch and freeze them, but do not put them in the water. So it takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of work to do a canner, pressure canner. It takes time to get to the pressure, it takes time to pressurize, it takes time to depressure. There are no shortcuts, so allow yourself some time. Here's an older model pressure canner. They used to have very heavy walls, which took a while to heat the water. The clamps are on the sides, the old dial gauge. If you find one or have one, just bring your gauges to be tested. As long as the canner is free from blemishes, you can use it. The gauges sometimes wear out just overuse, so a free service you have is testing your dial gauges. So no matter what year your unit is, every season, every year, you want to bring your pressure canner gauges to our UT Extension office that we can test them. You can call, make an appointment, drop it off, and I'll be happy to test it for you. So today's pressure canners have thinner wall kettles with a jar rack, a gasket, a dial, which is a weighted gauge or a dial gauge, automatic vent cover locks that port for the steam. They also have lots of safety features that you can safely. They are very safe. Once you lock your lid down, there's a vent or cover lock. It stays locked till the pressure goes down. There's a gasket inside. You want to make sure that it stays nice and pliable and not dried, nicked, or cracked. If any of your parts are stopping to work, you can go to a local co-op in McMinn County that make parts. Other stores in our area do, as well as the manufacturer's site. But you always want to get and maintain a good bumper canner. There's two types of gauges, a weighted and a dial gauge. Really, whichever one you prefer is the best one. They both work just fine. The weighted gauge, it rocks, it jiggles, and the jiggling sound is how you know what the pressure is at. You have to listen, for it, which is a little bit hard. You never can with them. But read your manufacturer's instructions and it can guide you. The dial gauge sometimes is a little bit easier for people because of the confidence you get that you know what the pounds of pressure would be because you can see it on the dial. Watch them the whole time, make sure they maintain their constant pressure, and get them checked every year. USDA doesn't have any recommendations. They do not recommend canning in a small pressure cooker. Pressure cookers are smaller in diameter and use less water than pressure canners, which results in the time it takes the canner to count the processing time, the time it takes the canner to cool down naturally to 0 pounds. Pressure in the process will be less than the standard canner. So when they test these recipes, they test them in the larger 16 quarts. So read on those. Is multi-cookers are very popular. They're also not recommended for canning for a couple of reasons. If it's an acid process in boiling water, sometimes they aren't big enough to get the 1 or 2 inches of water above the jar safely. Once you lock the lid, you don't know if it's a steady boil, if the water remains high, so you need that for safety. Another reason for low acid processed foods in a pressure canner, the jars must be placed on their sides in these canners because of the size, which is not good. And also, if you do have a larger multi-cooker and you put your jars upright, you don't know if it's reached 240 and how long it maintains that 240 through the cooking processing time. So laboratory testing has shown that the temperatures inside these pots can vary from model and brand, so they're not recommended for canning foods. 2 serious errors: high altitude not exhausting air. So make sure that you know where you are in the world. In McMinn County, we're not above 1,000 feet, so we don't have to adjust our processing time. And make sure you do know your altitude. And exhausting the air. This is very important. Air trapped inside your canner can lower the temperature and result in under-processing. Therefore, you have to exhaust the air through the vent for 10 minutes before you add the weight to cover the vent port. So make sure you do that. To vent the canner, just leave the port uncovered. The heat fills up in the canner, and then it boils out, producing steam. In about 10 minutes, that steam will run clear, and then you know that you're ready to put the vent port weight on to cover it. And then, let's talk about filling the jars. There's 2 ways to fill your jars, raw pack and hot pack. The recipe allows you to do either one. If you do a raw pack, you have raw food, you pack it in your jars, add the hot liquid, and you are ready to go. There's a disadvantage to that. Sometimes you put foods in there like green beans, and they're raw. They like to float, and it's really hard to pack it in. A hot pack is where you simmer the food 2 to 5 minutes, then you fill the jars with the hot liquid and the product, pack it in there, and then you're ready to go. So your preference. Some people like to add salt for flavor. It's not a preservative. The processing of the pressure can actually preserves the food, not the salt. It's not needed for food safety, it's just a flavoring. So if you like salt, then maybe add a little bit when you are ready to cook those green beans. Always check for headspace. There's a little tool on the screen that you can get for headspace. It's a little measuring tool. The space needed is between the food and the jar. That's the headspace. The space is needed to be there for expansion of your food as your jars are processed. It forms a vacuum seal, and if you do not leave enough headspace, food will expand and interfere with the seal. And if there's too much headspace, the processing time may not be long enough to drive all that air. Also, remove your air. Any little air bubbles that are in there, just pop them. They have debubbling tools. You can get a spatula, something that's plastic or rubber. Wipe your rims, make sure there's no sticky or food residue on there. As you put your lid on it, it won't get a good seal if it's got some sticky food there. So just wipe them clean and apply your lid and your ring and just finger tight them. You don't have to use your muscles too much. If it's too tight, as you close it, air can escape the jar during processing. That might cause a buckling and a sealed fail. So how do you use the pressure canner? So here we go. You have your pressure canner, you put 2 to 3 inches of hot water in there, get a ruler out and measure, then place your jars on the rack, then fasten the lid. Remember to vent your steam 10 minutes. So you turn your temperature on high, let that build up 10 minutes of steam venting, and then put the weight on the port, about 3 to 5 minutes, it'll start to pressurize your canner. Begin timing when the weight starts to rock or jiggle back or forth, or when the pressure gauge has the correct pressure. So the dial gauge, let it rise about to 8 pounds. Adjust your temperature down slightly until you get to the proper pounds of pressure. For a weighted gauge, let the canner heat quickly. Steam begins to escape. Adjust the heat down slightly until it jiggles or rocks according to the manufacturer's directions. So after it's processed for the right length of time at the right pounds of pressure, then you can turn the burner off. You can remove your pot from the heat if you can carry it, you can lift it, and allow it to cool without forcing. So depressurizing is a very important part. Do not force your canner to cool by trying to open it. You can warp the canner, cause a loss of liquid in your jars, the seals may fail. When the vent lock piston drops to a normal, then you know it's depressurized. When your gauge goes back to 0, it's depressurized. After it goes back down and it's depressurized, remove the weight from the vent port, wait 10 minutes, unfasten the lid, remove it, lift it away from you to let the steam escape and not in your face. Move the jars with the lifter, put them on a cooling rack, don't move them, leave them undisturbed for about 24 hours. Check your seals, your lids, you can label them, store them in a cool, dry place for 12 months. So lastly, the big question I get is green beans. How do I can my green beans? Do not put them in a water bath. It's a low acid food that needs 240 degrees to get the botulism spores to be killed. So green beans, pints or quarts, what jar are you using? If it's pints, you process it for 20 minutes, and quarts 25 minutes. So there's 2 boxes there. The first chart is a dial gauge, and the bottom is a weight gauge. The processing time is the same. and you can see the pounds of pressure a little bit different. So happy, safe canning. Try to enjoy canning. Try to have fun with canning. I enjoy it. There's lots that you can can. Try new recipes. Tested recipes are always what you want to look for. So we have some at UT Extension's website. A website that ends in EDU would be an educational institute, would be tested. The National Center for Home Food Preservation is where we go with all of our recipes. Ball has some great recipes, USDA. So follow a tested recipe. Whatever, have a question, call me, 745-2852, or you can email sjohn25@utk.edu. You can find it on our website. All of our home food preservation videos for this series are posted on our Extension Facebook page and YouTube channel, which is UT Extension McMinn. So enjoy canning, be safe. All the work that goes into canning, you want to do it the right way so that it's safe and it tastes delicious. So have a great day. Have a great weekend. I've enjoyed this series. Call me with questions. This is Sarah Kite with UT Extension in Linn County. Have a great weekend.